And we're going to say, we're going to get very specific here, and we have come to the conclusion that, based on our research, is that there are four very specific things. There needs to be a hybrid specific approach to territory management. We're going to get deeper into that, but it's different from an external, different from an internal. There needs to be a higher level of strategic consultative selling. These hybrids really need to have the skill to have the most efficient and effective conversations, both over the phone and face-to-face. And on the bottom of that slide, you see the ideal state, that ideally that would be combined with hybrids who have polished stand-up presentation skills for those situations that call for it. You really don't want to have a hybrid say, I'm good on the phone, but if you, you want me to come and present, I am not quite experienced there. And finally, the webcasting piece. And we know this from experience. It looks easy, but when you're trying to really work the technology at the same time as you're trying to sell and do that in a very polished way, it is not an easy thing. And typically, this is not a skill that's taught. So those are the four critical components of success, and I'm going to turn it back to Claudia to give you a little bit more detail on the territory management piece.
Thanks, Marianne. Territory management for hybrids. This is something Marianne and I have been spending a lot of time on, and it turns out to be a really complex process.
And not one that you could simply take the external wholesaler best practices, although they're very useful, and internal wholesaler best practices and pull them together. It's an extremely complex process that involves advisor targeting around the dollar opportunity and ease of sale. We really believe in the use of something called the masked customized touchpoint strategy, which is very interesting. In fact, you'll find that if you think about it, it's something a lot of advisors do, where they touch their clients all in the same way. And you know, that's an amazing thing when you have the technology in the phone. You have to understand hotspot travel, a term we like to think about. A hotspot is where the advisors are, and yes,
that's in Florida, right?
Well, it's a warm spot. But probably you've given your hybrids a moderate form of territory. You have not given them the most cushy territory, but they cannot just wander around that. In fact, it's even more important than your externals that they be where the advisors are. I mean, if they've got all of Idaho and all of North Dakota and all of South Dakota, that's a big turf. And then also what you really need, very important, is tools that pull it all together for them. Because if you think about it, the job of an external wholesaler is to get in front of as many target clients as possible. Job one. The job of an internal wholesaler is to get on the phone with as many target clients as possible. The difficulty, the challenge for a hybrid wholesaler is you've got three ways to touch: phone, face-to-face, and then whatever web-based tools you have. So you have to have three of these processes going at once. And we're going to give you just a quick overview of one tool that we've been using that I think will be helpful for you to look at. We're going to move on now, and I'm going to show you something else. And actually, what I'm going to do is take you to my desktop. Okay, great. And what we've got up on the screen right now is a hybrid capacity tool. Partially filled out, and I'll walk you through it. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it gives you some sense of the kinds of tools that hybrids do need to have. And the way this works is you can see my cursor on the screen, need to approximate how many weeks your hybrid is actually going to be working. You've got vacation. I know you try to avoid that, but that's definitely something that comes up. Then a realistic expectation about how many advisors could be seen in a day, followed by how many advisors you would like them to actually spend time with. And the way this tool works is that if you look here, these are the number of times a hybrid wants to see an advisor a year. throw in those numbers, and it tells you how many face-to-face meetings, how many weeks, and it would pop with the percentage that you have. And also, the last thing it would tell you, and I'm moving my cursor down here, is how many you'd have to manage without actually seeing them at all. So that's a tool that would be available to you. And it's the kind of thing you need to do to make certain that if travel is at 25%, that actually your hybrid has planned within their territory management to show at 25%.
And we've actually found when we have shared this with some companies that they're surprised. They try to keep putting the numbers in, and the numbers that are any higher in terms of the number of people that they'll see, that percent of travel really jumps up there. And so I think the key to this is, really deciding how many advisors are they going to manage specifically.
And keeping down their expectations. They say, well, I have 100 great advisors. I want to see them all 4 times a year, 5 times a year.
Right.
I put Marianne back in the driver's seat here.
But actually, Claudia went through the territory management, and we said that was really the first component. And the second piece is the consultative selling for hybrids. And we're not going to suggest that, that's a surprise that hybrids should be selling using the consultative model. But what we are going to suggest is that they need to do it at a somewhat higher level. And that is because basically they have to do it on the phone, face-to-face, in front of a group. On the phone, and really what we're talking about is that they have to be able to close sales over the phone.
And first impressions count. And that means you can't really go in and introduce yourself to an advisor. Hi, I'm a hybrid. You need to have a very compelling opening to your conversation and be comfortable in handling the objections and all that stuff you would expect from an advisor who's not familiar with hybrids. And then there's a strategic layer on top of all this, and I think that's because the advisor really does need to make an important distinction, that this is not an internal, but really somebody very different.
And so in terms of guidelines, what we want to do is suggest preparation is more critical for phone calls for a hybrid. And that's the piece that nobody wants to do, including Claudia and myself, in terms of preparing for a phone call. But every phone contact should include a minimum of 3 good questions, because they have to accomplish a lot to profile or uncover needs. And here's the one that may surprise you guys. And that is that we're going to suggest that hybrids need to close the majority of their sales over the phone, and we're going to give it a 75% number. 75% of their sales over the phone. Now that's a number to stretch for, reach for, but when you think about that, you may want to look at a stat to try to get close to that. So one of the questions that we have when we go out, people say that, you need to see somebody in person to buy, and we are not opposed to face-to-face selling, for sure. But the question is it absolutely required, and how many times is it required? And quite frankly, that depends on the advisor and what they're looking for. So, okay, we really talked about the phone. Let's talk about guidelines for face-to-face. And here's what may be a little bit different, again, hybrid specific. They need to, because they're so limited, they need to take on a larger objective than perhaps a regular external meeting where there are more visits involved. And so that again means that a lot of preparation, and we would suggest that these visits are primarily business review meetings. Not that externals don't do that, but simply because very often your advisors or a hybrid are going to be seen perhaps twice, maybe 3 times a year. And that's the place where a lot of the quality of the conversation needs to be done, and a lot needs to be accomplished. And so, of course, we have another tool for this. But again, these tools are designed to make the hybrid's life easier. What kinds of things should you be covering?